Naomi found that Boaz moved like stone, not slow, but grounded. Every motion carved from silence. When he reached for his coat, the floorboards didn't creak. When he stoked the fire, it barely cracked. He was not the kind of man who filled space. He erased it. And somehow, in his presence, she breathed easier. The first days in his cabin passed with quiet labor. She scrubbed the basin. He sawed timber. She patched a rip in his shirt sleeve. He left half a loaf of bread beside her bed without a word. Nothing spoken. No thanks. No debt. Yet the air between them began to hum, like something unfinished waited in the corners, listening. He never asked where she came from. She never asked what he'd lost. At night, the fire threw long shadows on the walls. Naomi would sit wrapped in her shawl, staring into the orange burn, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of boiled herbs. Her hands no longer trembled. Her eyes did not. The cold clawed at the cabin, but Boaz kept it warm. Each day, he brought wood from the shed. He carried it like it weighed nothing, though she saw the stiffness in his shoulder and the way he paused longer now before lifting again. One morning, she followed him. Not close, just enough to see the shed with its leaning roof, the old stump stained with years of axe strokes, the child-sized shovel half buried in snow nearby. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. But he saw her standing there, saw the stillness in her. And after a moment, he nodded toward the smaller shovel and said, "That was for a garden." "Did it grow?" she asked. No. No shame. No apology. Just that single word, said like a truth laid bare. Sometimes he spoke with his hands. A slice of apple placed gently on her plate. A fresh coat laid by the door. A clean set of linen on the bed, folded square like someone once taught him to care. Sometimes, Naomi caught him looking at her, not with hunger or pity, but curiosity. Like he was trying to place her into a puzzle he no longer wanted to solve. She asked once, as she stirred a pot of broth, "You always this quiet?" He shrugged. Talking's never fixed a fence. That was the longest sentence she'd heard from him. She almost smiled. One evening, as a storm coiled low over the hills, a knock came at the door, not frantic, not gentle. Just hard enough to bring winter in with it. Boaz opened it without hesitation. A young man stood there, wrapped in a thick coat, gun on his hip, badge half hidden beneath wool. He was law, but not the sheriff. Younger. Greedy-eyed. "I'm lookin' for a runaway widow," the deputy said. "Town's saying she skipped out on debts and may have taken property that ain't hers." Naomi stood behind Boaz, unmoving. The deputy's eyes slid over her like he was measuring a horse at market. "That her?" Boaz didn't answer. "Sir," the deputy said, stepping forward, "you got obligations. Harborin' a known troublemaker makes you party to it." Boaz moved between them with quiet finality. "I don't recall a skin for visitors," he said flatly. The deputy's hand twitched near his belt. "This ain't your choice, Coulter." Boaz didn't blink. "You want to take her, you better make peace with how." A beat of silence. Then the deputy backed off with a sneer. "You ain't worth the bullet. Not yet." He turned and left. Naomi exhaled only after the wind swallowed him. Boaz closed the door, slid the bolt home. "You shouldn't ve done that," she whispered. He turned to her. He didn't deserve to win. They didn't speak again that night. But the fire burned hotter than usual. The next day, Naomi went outside before sunrise. She stood barefoot in the snow. Not to punish herself, just to feel it. Cold. Real. Honest. It didn't pretend to care. It didn't whisper behind her back. It just was. Boaz found her there. "You'll lose your toes," he said. "I've lost worse." He offered no argument. Just set his coat over her shoulders. And stood with her as the first light cracked open across the white hills like a wound. She learned his patterns. At dusk, he lit 3 lanterns, one in the kitchen, one by the hearth, and one near the bedroom window. Always the same order. Always the same pause between each. like he was leaving light for someone who hadn't come home yet. He cooked with quiet discipline. Always 2 portions. Always enough for her, even before she asked. She caught him once staring at a piece of paper folded into quarters. It was soft from wear, creased at the corners. He tucked it away before she saw the writing. The land around the cabin bore signs of something that had been cared for and abandoned. A half-built chicken coop. An old swing nailed to a limb that had long since died. Boot prints smaller than his, hardened in dirt now frozen. One night, after he thought she was asleep, Naomi heard him murmuring a name. Eva. A whisper. Like it might break his ribs if said too loud. She didn't ask who Eva was. She didn't need to. They came again 3 days later. Not one man this time, 3. One carried a chain. One wore the same badge as the deputy. The third had the kind of face Naomi had learned to fear early. Too smooth, too sure, too used to being obeyed. They didn't knock. They waited just beyond the porch, where their horses stirred and snorted steam into the cold. Boaz stood in the doorway, watching them. "You can't hide her forever," the leader called. "Town council says she's to be returned. There's talk she poisoned her husband." Naomi stood beside him now, breath caught. Boaz said nothing. "She's bad for business. Folk are saying your cabin's cursed now." Still nothing. The third man tried again. "Ain't you lost enough, Coulter?" That did it. Boaz stepped outside, rifle in hand. "I don't owe you boys a goddamn thing," he said. "But you come here again, bring a preacher. One of us'll need buryin'." He turned his back on them. Naomi waited, breath tight, heart slamming against her ribs. The men didn't follow. They left in silence. That night, Naomi cooked. For the first time since she arrived, she made something warm on her own terms. Bread browned at the edges, beans with a pinch of salt, thick broth with dried thyme. Boaz ate without comment. Halfway through the meal, he set down his spoon. "I had a wife," he said. Naomi looked up. She bled out 2 winters back. With the child. He didn't look at her. Just kept speaking. "They buried him out back. Under the cottonwood. I stopped talking after that. Stopped riding into town. Didn't want to see anyone who hadn't died." He took a breath. "You're the first person I've let in this house since." Naomi set her spoon down, too. "I didn't kill my husband," she said. "But I wanted to." Boaz nodded slowly. "Sometimes wantin' is worse." They didn't say more. But that night, they sat closer to the fire than they ever had. The following day, Naomi found him sanding a length of wood by hand, shaping it into something small. "What's that?" she asked. He held it out. It was a horse. Like the one she'd found tucked behind the stove. "I used to make these," he said. "Before." She held it gently. It was smooth and simple. But its legs curved slightly inward, like it was tired. Like it had lived through a storm and stood anyway. Naomi traced her thumb across its back. And handed it back to him. The storm rolled in faster than they expected. Sleet cut across the sky like glass. Winds shrieked through the eaves. The fire struggled. Boaz nailed boards over the windows while Naomi gathered every blanket in the house. When the door rattled on its hinges, Boaz braced it with his shoulder. They stayed like that, pressed against the storm. And when it finally passed, and the snow fell soft again, Naomi turned to him and said, "I'll stay. Not as a guest. Not as a burden. Just as a choice." Boaz didn't speak. But he nodded. And in that nod was something heavier than any oath. Later that night, as the fire settled low and the wind died down, Naomi stepped outside. She walked past the porch, past the woodpile, past the frozen shovel still half buried in the earth, and stood before the cottonwood. 2 wooden crosses rested there, small, weathered, one newer than the other. She knelt, dug her fingers into the snow, whispered a name that wasn't hers. "Eva." And then she said something she hadn't spoken in years. I'll remember you. Behind her, a lantern glowed in the window. She stood slowly and turned back toward the house. The cabin no longer looked like a place where someone had died. It looked like a place someone might live. The wind had quieted, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like something holding its breath. Naomi stood at the chopping block, splitting wood like she had every morning that week. Her body moved from habit now. Swing, crack, lift, repeat. But her mind wandered. She had started planting seeds near the back steps, just beneath the kitchen window, where the snow had melted down to dirt. Wildflower seeds. Maybe foolish, maybe not. Boaz was fixing the barn roof. She could hear the scrape of the hammer, the shifting boards. He hadn't spoken much since the last visit from town. They didn't need many words anymore. She knew how he liked his coffee. He knew how to leave her silence without loneliness. But something was coming. She felt it in the way his eyes lingered on the tree line, in the way he stood still a moment longer each evening, watching the horizon before locking the door. That morning, she found a folded piece of paper tucked beneath her coffee cup. Boaz's handwriting was stiff, uneven. If they come again, don't stay. There's a pistol under the floorboard. South path leads to the old riverbed. Ride hard, don't turn. She stared at it for a long while, heart folding in half like the paper in her hand. He was planning for endings. Midday brought dust on the horizon. A single rider at first. Then two more. Naomi stood by the cabin steps, dress dusted in ash from the stove. Her hair was pulled back in a tight knot. No apron. No kindness in her eyes. Boaz emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, and walked to the edge of the clearing. 3 men. One was the deputy again, smug as ever. The second was a rancher Naomi recognized by reputation. Frank Sutter, loud and mean, with a voice that sounded like it had never once said, "Sorry." The third wore a suit too clean for riding and smiled like someone who'd already counted the bullets and bet on none being fired. "You've had your warning, Coulter," the deputy called. Boaz didn't respond. The man in the suit dismounted. His boots crunched over frostbitten grass. "This doesn't need to end badly. We just need the woman. Town council has questions. You know how rumors work." Naomi stepped down from the porch. "She's not property," Boaz said evenly. "Never said she was. Just said she needs to answer." Naomi's voice cut in, calm and sharp. "You never asked questions before my husband died. Only now that someone gave me shelter." The suit offered a polite nod. "We're trying to maintain order, ma'am." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Whose order?" A long pause. The wind picked up again. Boaz shifted his stance. Rifle still down. Finger still near the trigger. "Make your choice," the suit said. "Man like you knows what's smart." "I'm not smart," Boaz said, stepping forward. "I'm just done watching people bleed for nothing." The deputy muttered something Naomi couldn't hear. But Frank Sutter raised his voice. "You think she's worth a grave, Coulter?" Boaz didn't answer. He raised the rifle. It wasn't pointed at anyone. The silence after that was heavier than the wind. Naomi stepped forward, slow, until she stood beside him. "She's worth planting things for," Boaz said finally. "That's more than I've said about anyone in years." The suit exhaled. "You've made your point." They left. No threat. No goodbye. Just turned their horses and vanished into the dust again. That night, Naomi sat by the fire, turning his note over in her hands. He stood near the door, as if still waiting for the knock that never came. She looked up. "Did you mean to send me away?" He didn't lie. "I meant for you to live." Her voice softened. "That wasn't your choice." A silence passed between them. Not cold. Not final. Just honest. Boaz moved closer. Sat beside her. "I don't know how to keep people," he admitted. "Only how to bury them." Naomi took his hand. "You don't keep people," she said. "You stand with them." or you don't. He looked at their hands. Rough calluses, burned scars, torn nails. Both had been shaped by survival. She leaned into him, forehead resting against his shoulder. Outside, the wind had changed direction. Warmer now. And behind them, in the corner of the cabin, the wildflower seeds waited for morning. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.